Welcome to this webinar on Horizon Europe Cluster 2, Proposal Writing and Application Submission. So my name is Kim and I'm the UK National Contact Point for Cluster 2. Before we get started, please be aware that this webinar is being recorded and we will publish the recording after the event, and I will share a link with you all once this is completed. So thank you all for joining us. Let's have a quick look at what we're covering today. So in a couple of minutes, we'll open the session with a keynote from Ms. Mina, Stareva, Deputy Head of Unit of the European Commission, Directorate General for Research and Innovation for Health and Societal Transitions. So following the keynote, we'll have a short Q&A with Mina. So please do use the Q&A function and not the chat during this time to pose questions to Ms. Stareva, and use the upvote buttons to let us know which questions are most important for us to address. So following the keynote, I will then take us through some important aspects of proposal writing and submitting an application. And within this, I'll cover what you need to think about as you're writing, such as the cross-cutting themes, impact, and the evaluation criteria. And we'll also take a look at the application portal as well. We'll then finish the first half of the webinar with a Q&A. And again, if you have questions for me, please use the Q&A function. And my colleague Jamie will kindly support me in selecting your questions to answer during the session. Following this, we'll have a 15-minute break and return at 2:15 p.m. When we'll hear some remarks on Horizon Europe from Professor Christopher Smith, the Executive Chair of the Arts and Humanities Research Council and UKRI International Champion. So just to mention, unfortunately, Professor Smith wasn't able to join us in person today, but has kindly recorded a message for us to share with you all. Following this, I'll briefly talk through the proposal evaluation stages before we welcome 3 members of successful Horizon Europe projects who will share their top tips and recommendations from their experiences of their proposal writing processes and thoughts on what helped make their applications successful. After each presentation, we'll be hosting Q&A, so please do bring some questions to those sessions after the break as well. And again, please use the Q&A function. And we're aiming to finish at 3:30. So we have a lot to cover. So we're going to get started now. And a quick reminder, we are recording and we will be sharing the recording, the slides and supplementary materials after the webinar. So first up, I would like to welcome Ms. Mina Stareva to the webinar. Thank you so much, and over to you.
Thank you very much. Dear organizers, Kim, dear participants, I'm extremely happy to be here with you, though virtually, connecting from heavily snowing Brussels, which is a rare thing. And I would really like to start by this very exciting and positive news, which is the fact that as of 1st of January this year, United Kingdom's researchers and organizations can fully participate in Horizon Europe on the same terms as researchers from other associated countries. We from the European Commission, we very much welcome the United Kingdom's association with Horizon Europe, and we are very, very much looking forward to making this a success together for our researchers, for our scientists, businesses, but also for our citizens. And of course, we very strongly encourage our European stakeholders, but also the United Kingdom's counterparts, you being so many connected also here, to continue and to deepen your research cooperation. So this is crucial for us. Having said that, we can go to the next slide, and I very much thank you, Kim, for assisting me with this. The focus of today, of course, is to provide you an overview of Cluster 2 under Horizon Europe, which is culture, creativity, and inclusive societies. But I would also like to remind you, considering also your background, of the work that we are doing also, especially in my unit, where we are also responsible for mainstreaming social aspects across the whole program, actually, from the legal basis to the strategic plan to the topics under Horizon Europe different parts, from clusters to pillars, etc. I will try to avoid the different jargons we have. Bear with me, and you're also invited to ask any question you may have after my intervention. Going to the next slide, of course, this is just a general overview of Horizon Europe, this big machinery behind, and Pillar 2. So the Culture, Creativity, and Inclusive Society cluster is located within Pillar 2, the global challenges, which is actually aimed to address and to provide solutions to the identified global challenges. Going to the next slide, I would like to guide you through actually the architecture and the priority, the policy behind the Culture, Creativity, Inclusive Society cluster, where actually the cluster aims to strengthen first European democratic values, including the rule of law and fundamental rights. Second, safeguarding our cultural heritage. And third, promoting socioeconomic transformations that contribute to inclusion and growth. In particular, this cluster mobilizes multidisciplinary expertise in SSH, so social sciences and humanities, for understanding fundamental contemporary transformations of society, economy, politics, and culture. So you can see that it is divided in 3 intervention areas, namely democracy and governance, cultural heritage, and socioeconomic transformations. What is important to know is that all topics under these clusters are expected to mainstream social sciences and humanities and to include a gender dimension in research and innovation content. On the gender equality side, you may have more practical information later on, but it is important for you to know, because with Horizon Europe, we have introduced a new eligibility criterion, which is for public bodies and research organizations to have a gender equality plan in place, or a gender equality strategy in place, in order to apply for funding or in order to sign a grant. And in addition to that, when it comes to research and innovation actions, the gender dimension needs to be actually looked at and evaluated. So having said that, we can actually go to the next slide, where you will see, I would like to guide you through the 3 destinations that we have under this cluster, and to provide you a little bit of taste of the different topics that are currently being funded. So going to the next slide, you would see that actually this destination try to provide actually response to implement the 6 European Commission policy priorities, which you see on the screen. And if you go on the next slide, you would see some of the very important policy legislation and policy documents that have been adopted under the current mandate of the Commission. So these 5 years from 2019 to 2024. And of course, the topics funded under the democracy and governance aims to implement, provide a response to those policy challenges. Going to the next slide, you would see that within this intervention area, the research aims to contribute to the protection and nurturing of democracies with a both reactive and proactive approach, where on the reactive side, we want to facilitate evidence-based responses to protect democracies. And on the proactive side, we are looking into how to make democracies more resilient. So going to the next slide, please, you would see the type of projects, of topics that are currently open. Call for deadline for application is 7th of February. We currently fund 12 topics under this destination, and you would see the variety of topics actually on this slide. I'm not going through these topics for many reasons. One, of course, is that they are all listed in the work program of Cluster 2, but more importantly is that recently, around beginning of November last year, we had an information day for the entire Cluster 2, where we actually, we also recorded it. At the end of my presentation, you have the links with the presentation of all the 3 destinations, topic per topic, with some important also elements. So in case you're interested in, I would just invite you to go and to have a more in-depth look into those videos. Then going to the next intervention area, the cultural heritage and cultural and creative industries. On the next slide, you would see, I would start actually by saying that this destination is not created by chance. It is actually for the first time that there is a dedicated work program to cultural heritage and cultural and creative industries, which also shows the focus, the emphasis the European Union is giving to this priority of cultural heritage, where actually the destination responds to many of those priorities. The cultural and creative industries are seen as an important driver for innovation and competitiveness, but also for nurturing a sense of belonging, where we really think that investing more into this destination would help us actually strengthening the European research and innovation impact and sense of identity and belonging. Going to the next slide, you would see that the destination priorities cover, of course, the important European priorities of contributing to the Green Deal and the digital transitions, contributing to the new European Bauhaus initiative. And these are new initiative also let's say, born somehow with the current Commission. We also contribute to new priorities such as a comprehensive approach to mental health, where, for instance, we clearly see the culture and arts as new and unconventional venues for actually contributing to the I'm reading also the chat, to contributing to the mental health and overall well-being priority. Going to the next slide, you will see that in this work program, actually, we specify the expected impact of the destination of cultural heritage as follows. The full potential of cultural heritage, arts, and cultural and creative sectors is realized as a driver of sustainable innovation and a European sense of belonging through a continuous engagement with society, citizens, and economic sectors, as well as through better protection, restoration, and promotion of cultural heritage. Going to the next slide. I use this slide to present you something that is very particular to this Horizon Europe destination. So we do fund 3 different priorities. So green cultural heritage, of course, as a driver to achieve a sustainable climate transition, the digital cultural heritage, and the innovative cultural heritage. Under the digital, in the last 2 years, we actually gave birth to a new initiative, which is the creation of the European Collaborative Cultural Heritage Cloud, as a new platform bringing together researchers, archivists, professional cultural heritage professionals to exchange in a safe space. We actually launched the implementation of the cloud through under the 2023 work program with the calling for setting the governance and the architecture of the cloud. And we will have in 2024 work program with the separate timeline, a specific call for proposals for 5 topics aimed at developing innovative tools to implement the Cultural Heritage Cloud. So this Cultural Heritage Cloud has its own timeline in our work program. 2024 calls will be open sometimes around June and will be closed. Deadline for application will be closed to end of the year or beginning of next year. This to be confirmed later on in the coming month or so, but you do have your excellent national contact point, Kim. So please bear in mind that whatever question you have, you should really turn to your national contact point who would be able to provide you up-to-date information and also link with us in the Commission so that we really equip you with whatever you need actually to apply to our call for proposals. So going to the next slide, and actually to the one that comes next. So this is the 3rd and last destination under cluster 2. It aims to achieve 2 important impacts. One is the socioeconomic resilience and sustainability, and then the second one is the inclusive growth of the European Union. these expected impacts, it's not, it's not without reason that I mentioned those. Actually, all the call for proposals and all the topics that we have in our work program are aimed to contribute to these expected impacts. So each time you're preparing your proposal, you need to bear in mind the specific expected impacts that are linked to this destination. Going further, I would like to just to present you again a taste of what is currently being being open for application until 7th of February, a variety of topics you would see, starting from socioeconomic impacts of loneliness. This is very much linked with our effort to address societal well-being and individual well-being, but then to human-friendly deployment of artificial intelligence. We have a very new novel topic on methodologies for team working of researchers, etc. You can have a look at those topics. They are very diverse, because as you can see, this destination is like a mini mirror of our society. So you can really look at the different angles and address the different transformations that we are currently facing. So going to the next slide, or probably before going to the SSH integration, maybe just a very short word on what is next. Of course, we are currently very much engaged into the preparation of the next work program for 2025, which builds on the interactions with member states and associated countries. It also builds on the consultation of the stakeholders and the wide community, and where we are currently coming with a very robust planning of towards the adoption of the work program 2025. Beginning of next year. So we do have time. And again, staying in touch with Kim, with your national contact point on Cluster 2, you would be able to really be informed on time on the stages of preparation of the work program or consultation, and to be ready also to prepare your proposal or your collaboration for the next work program 2025. So I will spend 2 more minutes on something that we really, that we are very keen on, which is the SSH integration. So Europe is a world leader in the field of social sciences and humanities, and this you know it. And in our Director General for Research and Innovation, we are working very hard to maintain this leading position. We actually have several mechanisms in place that cover the whole cycle of topic design to contract management, where we try to effectively, efficiently integrate the social sciences and humanities. And again, the integration of SSH, it's not an end in itself. Our goal is to create lasting positive impacts, addressing societal needs and enhancing overall welfare. On the next slide, on the next 3 slides, actually, you would see our legal and legal provisions, but also the efforts we make from the topic design to the implementation and the entire project lifecycle to address SSH. You may be familiar with those. You can actually move, Kim, to the next, to the last slide on this. But you need to bear in mind that the topics that are flagged as SSH under Horizon Europe, you would need to provide a justification. You would need to actually address the social sciences and humanities aspects. This may come later on today, or later on when you are at the moment, at the time of preparing an application, but it is important for us. And what is also very important is to highlight that the emphasis that we give on interdisciplinarity, and this is really important for you, because the emphasis that we give on the integration of SSH across the program is not intended to dilute the important contribution of SSH to the various clusters and topics and pillars that we have in Horizon Europe, but on the contrary, to really integrate social science and humanities approaches, research methods, teams more strongly at the benefit of solving societal challenges. So this is a must for us, and our hierarchy and our commissioner is fully committed to that. So this is the main message that I wanted to give you today. By this, I would stop, knowing that at the end of my presentation, you have 2 slides with useful information, so links towards the videos and the different events that we had on Info Day. So the Info Day is dedicated to the cultural and creative, to the cultural heritage cloud. and the info days dedicated broadly to cluster 2. So feel free to have a look if you're interested in, and of course, please, this is a momentum that we all want to share together. Don't hesitate to ask questions, to come to Kim, to come to ourselves in the Commission. We are there really to make this association a success together with our European stakeholders community. So I stop here, and I hope that I managed to respect the time.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Mina, for your introduction and encouragement for continued UK engagement with Horizon Europe, and particularly across Cluster 2, Social Sciences, Arts and Humanities. We're really pleased that the UK has rejoined Horizon Europe as an associated country, and all the benefits that brings to the UK, the EU, and the international research and innovation community, as you've said. So we are just a little bit over time, but I'm happy to give 2 minutes for questions. Jamie, if you'd like to select some from the Q&A for us, please.
Yeah, so Mina, you talked about the next work programme and how that's currently being developed. Do we know, is there a rough timeline for when it will be publicly announced or not yet?
Well, the answer is no. And there are many aspects to consider here. Of course, we are still in early 2024, where we are about to start the process of preparing the work program 2025 in line with the strategic orientations for the next strategic plan, so 2025-2027. But we also need to consider something which is very important, which is that after following the European elections in June this year, we are going to have a new college, a new commission, and we will need to take into considerations the priorities also set by the new commission. This is why it is impossible now to commit to any firm deadline, but of course we are aiming at the beginning of next year to have the new work program in place, 2025.
Thank you. And then just two quick ones then. So you talked about the importance of gender and sort of how that's now being needed to be captured within the application, also the assessment process. There was a question about sort of in the UK, we've got the Equality Act, which covers a wide range of protected characteristics. And I was asking sort of how would you expect the same level of commitments? How would you expect those protected characteristics to be addressed or recognised within the application and assessment process from your side?
Well, of course, in the Commission, we absolutely know that UK is a leader in equality, diversity, and inclusion issues. When we started with introducing, with working with all member states on developing a gender equality plan, of course, we wanted to make sure that all countries and all organizations within all member states and associated countries are eligible. So we started by the gender equality strategies. Having a gender equality strategy is built on some very basic principles, such as having a strategy, commitment from the hierarchy, collection of data and monitoring, etc. And this is also the case for the EDI issues. So for us, this is the very starting point. What my colleagues working on gender equality in next to my door actually is that they're also working towards intersectionality, where they consider also the different equality and non-discrimination aspects toward a more intersectional approach. But this is not the case for gender equality plans. For Horizon Europe, I would say that in the case of UK, I would be surprised, not to comply with the gender equality plans principles. But receiving this question, I would like to make a promotion of the work that my colleagues on gender equality are doing, because with the introduction of these new eligibility criteria, we also said, okay, we are going to reward those institutions there that are doing the best. So they have set a price, and so they have a prize for gender equality champions, where actually there are 3 different categories, and there is a application process each year. Currently, we are building on the 2023, but as of next year, of course, UK entities will be entitled to apply. But one of the category is having a sustainable equality strategy, intersectional strategy, etc. So I think that this can be pretty much of interest for UK research organizations, and I'm going to post the link to the Gender Equality Champions webpage here so that participants are familiar, of course, with the process.
Brilliant, thank you. We have other questions, but we're going to have to end it there so we can move on to the next section. But what I would say is there's been a number of questions come in about, and people want to know more about the integration of SSH and how that works in practice in terms of the application assessment. And I know we sort of did skip through a number of those slides, so I think it might be easy when people go back and revisit that, and then we can maybe pick that up afterwards, sort of via emails to the NCP potentially. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is fair. I mean, I think that this is why precisely why I provided a very, very detailed information in the slides. You will see it, and you have all the information on all the different stages. So from the design to the evaluation to the reporting and the monitoring from the Commission. So always there. Please have a look.
Yeah.
And once again, I mean, we are really looking towards the efficient integration. Sometimes we ask through a standard sentence, actually, applicants to provide us with information on how they intend to integrate SSH, but we really look towards a more not ticking the box exercise, but a very robust explanation, which is then followed up at the level of the monitoring.
Great, thank you very much, Mina, and thank you also for your questions. If there are any questions that we haven't been able to answer in this during this time, we'll come back to you in writing after the email and share some responses for those. So thank you again, Mina, so much for joining us. It's been great to have you here and to hear from you.
Thank you very much. I wish you a very fruitful meeting. Enjoy it, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you very much. Okay, so now we're going to come to the proposal writing and application submission. But just before we do that, I do want to highlight some of the key things that I can offer in my role as UK NCP for Cluster 2, and in particular for those of you considering applying to Cluster 2 calls. So I was going to go through this slide, but we are slightly behind time. So this slide will tell you everything that I'm able to support you with, including sharing information, offering assistance, advice and training to improve the quality of Horizon proposals, which is why we're here today, and also signposting to other useful resources and supports that's available. So on this slide, I also have a list, links to the list of UK national contact points for the other cluster areas, and also a list of the NCPs in the EU and internationally, which is available on the Funding and Tenders portal, which I've also linked on the slide. And again, we'll be sharing these slides and also the webinar link after the webinar. So one thing to highlight as we're approaching the deadline on the 7th of February is if you're thinking about getting in touch for a proposal review, please do, but also consider asking your consortium partners to reach out to their in-country NCP for Cluster 2 as well. As I mentioned, there's a link on the slide and you can find the full list of NCPs from the EU and beyond there. So on to the next slide. So with this in mind, then I'm going to talk us through Cluster 2 proposals, and we'll look at the writing process and then take a look at the application form and submission process. So throughout the presentation, I'm going to be sharing some tips, some things to look out for, and some quick wins that could help take your proposal up a half mark or a full mark. And that sounds quite a small thing, but it does make a big difference. A half a mark can be the difference between being funded and not. So I hope this will be helpful. So as you can see, today's focus will not be on the calls themselves, and Mina very helpfully flagged those commission events back in October that talk you through the calls themselves. So if you would like those reference materials, I've also put a link on the slide to our website, which also has some resources about the calls themselves, including from my last webinar in November, which was about the Cluster 2 calls. So today's webinar is more about the practical aspects of what's required now we're nearing the deadline. So as many of you will know, Horizon Europe proposals are split into two parts, Part A and Part B. So Part A consists of system-generated web-based admin forms that contain the information entered by participants through the submission system, and that's in the Funding and Tenders portal. And then Part B is the narrative portion of the proposal and consists of 3 sections that correspond to the specific evaluation criteria. So Part B is the largest part of your proposal, and this is the part that you should aim to demonstrate that your idea is ambitious and convince the evaluators to fund your project. So I will be taking us through some key tips for Part A and the online system a little later in this presentation, but firstly we're going to have a quick look at some of the key areas of Part B. So on this slide, you'll see I've linked to the generic templates for both parts, and I would suggest looking at these to familiarise yourself with what the application form looks like, and also look at the guidance provided by the European Commission in that document. There are lots of useful comments provided, and that will make the process a little less daunting. So having said this, please do not use these templates to complete your application. So the actual application form is on the submission system, and there you can find the live Part A form and download the part for Part B. So these forms are specific to each call, and that's because the different calls can have different requirements, and the generic template is updated depending on the requirements set out in the call descriptions. So if you do complete and upload the generic form, you might miss required sections from the application, and your proposal will not be evaluated. So firstly, to note for Part B then, there are 3 sections to complete, and these handily map onto the criteria used to evaluate proposals. And these are excellence, which includes sections for objectives and ambition and methodology. And then we have impact, which includes sections for project pathways towards impact and measures to maximize impact. And then we have quality and efficiency of the implementation, which includes work plans and resources, and the capacity of participants and the consortium as a whole. So Part B has an overall page limit, which differs depending on the call's type of action. And these details can be found in the Part B template guidance, and also just referenced quickly on the slides. And please do note that these page limits are very important because the system does count the pages. So if you go over the limit, the additional pages will be deleted before the evaluators see the proposal, so they won't count. So with these sections in mind, what should we be including in proposals? So other than the obvious principles, like ensuring your proposed work is within the scope of the work programme topic and call, and that you meet the essential criteria, there are other aspects that you need to make sure you've included, such as the cross-cutting or horizontal themes, which are also mandatory, but sit outside of the work programme text. Now, these can be found in the Horizon Europe programme guide, which I've linked on this slide. And these also have supplementary guidance in the general annexes document, which I've also linked on the slide. So alongside reading the call text and destination descriptions in the work programme, you also need to have read the general annexes and the Horizon Europe programme guide carefully. So the cross-cutting themes sit across the whole work programme and across all clusters in Pillar 2. So you need to be thinking about these when designing your project, making sure these are clearly included in your proposals. So this is something the Commission have been driving home at their recent events. And if you go back and watch the event on the calls from October, you'll see this there as well. So I'm conscious of the time still, so I'm not going to go through all of these because the descriptions and guidance available in the programme guide is quite thorough and covers what you need to include in your proposal, such as which platforms you could use to cover the requirement around open science practices and the details for the requirement to have a gender equality plan. So this programme guide covers all of these cross-cutting themes for you. And as I've said, the links will be on the slides and we will share these with you soon. So another content aspect that you need to include in Part B revolves around impact, which is the second evaluation criteria for proposals. Now, compared to traditional academic research, which might be more fundamental or explorative in nature, Horizon Europe project proposals are impact-oriented. So the pathway to impact is a very important concept and a term used by the Commission to describe the logical steps taken towards the achievement of the expected impacts of the project over time, and in particular, beyond the duration of the project. So the pathway to impact starts from your project results or output and is about how these results lead to the expected outcomes, which are listed in the call topic description, and the expected impact, which are described in the destination descriptions. So I've included the earlier stages in my diagram because I think it helps to conceptualize the overall process, and I hope this will be something helpful as a visual aid for you later. So now we've seen the stages and where the different levels of impact are expected, I'm going to touch quickly on how to maximize impact. So when we think about maximizing the impact of a project, we need to be thinking about the dissemination, exploitation, and communication plans. So these are also evaluated in the impact section. So I know later on, some of our speakers are going to talk about this in their presentations after the break. So I'm going to flag some key thoughts, and then I'll let you hear from their first-hand experiences. I think that will be more useful. My colleagues are also going to drop some definitions for the terms dissemination, exploitation, and communication in the chat in case you're not familiar with them. So having a DEC plan it is a requirement, and you need to be thinking about the appropriate scale of these to the scale of your project. So these also need to include concrete actions which can be implemented both during and after the project. So some of the elements you might want to think about and include are planned measures to maximise the impact of projects, target groups, for example, scientific community, end users, financial actors, the public at large, and the proposed channels to interact. You might also want to think about communication measures for promoting the project and its findings throughout the full lifespan of the project. And in here, we could think about the open science practices from the cross-cutting themes. So then policy feedback measures to contribute to policy shaping and supporting the implementation of new policy initiatives and decisions. And very helpfully, Mina has shared those earlier in this webinar. And we also need to be thinking about a follow-up plan to foster the exploitation or uptake of the results. So that might be a comprehensive and feasible strategy for the management of intellectual property. And also, if the exploitation is expected primarily in non-associated third countries, you'll need to give a convincing justification that this is still in the European Union's interest. So overall, the impact section of a Horizon Europe proposal is like a well-drafted business plan. In this, you need to convince the Commission that the budget they distribute to each project is worth the money and the effort in the long term. So now, as we've mentioned, there are 3 sections of Part B that you'll need to complete, and these map onto the evaluation criteria. And as you can see, these are excellence, impact, and quality and efficiency of implementation. So under excellence, you will be evaluated on the clarity and relevance of the project's objectives and also the soundness of the proposed scientific methodology. And methodology has 2 main remarks, including the need to take into consideration the gender dimension in the research and innovation content when designing your methodology, and the quality of the open science practices. And as we know, both of these are cross-cutting themes, and there's more information on those in the Horizon Europe programme guide. So some key messages or questions you might want to ask for the excellence criteria are, firstly, have you defined clear, focused, quantified objectives, perhaps 3 to 5 goals for the project? Have you made a clear link to the specific challenge and scope of the core topic? Have you included a thorough description of the state of the art and how the activities will build upon it and advance it? Have you written to convince the evaluators that the concept will work? Have you justified your approach with evidence and highlighted any unique selling points? So now moving on to impact. The European Commission will evaluate the credibility of the pathways you set out for achieving the expected outcomes and impacts, and also the suitability and quality of the methods you select to maximise the expected outcomes and impacts. In other words, the pathways to impact and the quality of your dissemination, exploitation, and communication plan. And again, some questions you may wish to ask yourselves when thinking about impact. So 1, is there a strong link between your programme of work and the expected impact? Have you quantified the expected impact? Have you described how you will monitor the project and measure the impact? Have you included a detailed dissemination plan that is tailored to the stakeholders and explains their involvement? Have you explained how the work will be continued after the end of the project? And so finally, let's look at the last evaluation criteria. So for quality and efficiency of the implementation, you'll be evaluated on the quality and effectiveness of the work plan you propose and the capacity and role of each participant and the consortium as a whole. So that's to ensure that you're bringing the appropriate skills and expertise to the project. Again, some questions you might want to ask yourselves is, does your work plan follow a logical structure, including clear feedback loops? Have you provided sufficient detail to justify the budget allocations? Have you included a consistent level of detail for each work package? Have you included a risk plan? Have you explained why the project team has been selected? Have you considered the balance of effort and whether the partners have provided evidence that they have sufficient operational capacity? And do you have sufficient industry involvement? So all three of these criteria are are evaluated and then marked out of 5. So 0 being failure to address the criterion or not being able to be assessed because of missing or incomplete information, and 5 or excellent, which means the proposal successfully addresses all relevant aspects of the criterion and any shortcomings are minor. So please also be aware, as I've mentioned, half marks can be given, and that can be the difference between you receiving funding and not. So when thinking about the evaluation criteria, you also need to be thinking about your evaluator. So although we won't know who this is, there are some assumptions that we should be making that could help improve scores, because as I've said, even a half mark can make a difference. So that might include ensuring your text doesn't have jargon or complex terms without explanation, making sure it's easy to follow and include key terms from the call text, and also to note it may be that your evaluator's first language is not English, or that your evaluator is not an expert in the exact topic of your research. So it is helpful to keep this in layman's terms. So they also may be reviewing tens of applications and only have a limited time to read each. So making sure you're including enough succinct summaries in tables and diagram form is also important. And these need to be consistent and match the details in your proposal. It's not a way to introduce new information, but as summary and visual aids, they are very helpful. So that's part B of the application. There is a lot of information and a lot to think about and different pieces of guidance across the different documents. So just to confirm, I'll be sharing these slides and the recording after the webinar with all the links and also attending to the questions. So to supplement these slides, I will also share a proposal checklist. And this is a resource created by my predecessor, Annie, that I've been updating and that I hope will be helpful to you. So the checklist includes the key points I've raised so far, and that's including checking you've covered the key principles such as scope, going beyond the state of the art, and drawing on previous research and projects, keeping jargon out of your proposal, and writing for an audience or evaluator whose first language may not be English, and lots of other things. So now we've looked at part B, we're going to return to part A and look at what this includes and the system where you submit both parts of your proposal. So once you're certain you're going to apply as the lead organisation or the coordinator, I would suggest starting this process. So there are some admin tasks to do in order to start your application, and that includes registering on the system if you're a new organisation to Horizon Europe and obtaining a PIC, or for already established groups such as UK universities, you'll need to contact your research office to ask for your institution's PIC. So the PIC, PIC, is a unique 9-digit participant identification code. So you access the application system through the specific call that you're applying to in the Funding and Tenders portal under the section titled Start Submission. And as you can see, I have a screenshot on this slide for us to see. So then you click Start Submission and Confirm, and then you're taken into the application platform where you'll start with the Create Proposal section, and that looks like this. So I'm sorry if this is small on your screen. It may be easier to refer back to these images later when I share them after the webinar, but hopefully you can see them clearly enough for now. I'm not going to talk through each section in great detail. Quite a lot of part A is inputting data, and it's fairly easy to follow and does include guidance on the online forms. But I'm going to flag some of the more nuanced qualities with the system and the information that's required. So on the Create Proposal page here, you'll need the PIC for your organisation. The lead organisation is also known as the coordinator. So once you have selected the PIC, some of the other information is automatically added to the form, including the short name. On this page, you can also add contact details for the lead organisation and provide the acronym and short summary for your project. So in the example I'm providing today, I have the Democracy 0101 as the call, with UKRI as the coordinator and myself as the main contact, which we'll see on the next slide. So once you've submitted the details of the lead organisation and the main contact, you'll come to this page where you can add your partners. So looking at the top, you can see the stage of the application, and we're currently in participants section. Now looking in the left column on the page, you can see the deadline is highlighted green. This changes colour in the traffic light system as we get closer to the deadline. I do also want to flag the submission time here. 5 p.m. Brussels time is 4 p.m. UK time. And please, please don't wait to attempt to submit in the last hour or two ahead of the deadline. I've done this test application a couple of weeks ago, and it took almost 3 minutes for the system to go through the final processes. And that was a random Thursday, weeks ahead of the deadline. So please complete at least a day before the deadline, if that's at all possible for your team. So next in the left side column, we can see the call data with the ID, the topic, the type of action, etc. And any amber warning notices will come there as well. So the proposal ID is also in this box, and we'll always start with SEP. And below this is the Part B template. And as I mentioned before, it's these templates in the application system that you need to be using to draft your Part B. So once you have drafted Part B, you convert the file into a PDF and upload it into the Proposal Forms tab, which I'll come to on the next slide. So coming back to this slide, in the main area of the page, we can see some handy notices at the top. This includes flagging the eligibility criteria, which I'm missing in this example, but of course, yours will have all the necessary partners. So at this point, as I've mentioned, you can add your partners and also associated partners. And the key message here for the UK, you need to make sure that the UK partners are listed as partners and not associated partners. So unfortunately, there's some repeated terminology going on, but to be clear, being an associated country is different to being an associated partner. So the UK is an associated country and UK organisations are partners. So you can also edit the coordinator. And just to confirm, the coordinator is the institution, not a named person. The named person in the form is called the main contact. So you can also edit the coordinating institution here as well. So in this example, as I've said, UKRI is showing as the coordinator and I am listed as the main contact. So some of the information in here automatically generated when we input the PIC in the previous stage. Now I'm going to move past this page, but you can come back to this stage later to add more members if your consortium changes. But when you're ready to go to the next phase, you press save and go to the next step. So the next page in the is the proposal forms. So there's no changes to the left column here, but you can still see the deadline, the call data, the proposal data and Part B download, and the support and help desk, which is managed by the European Commission. And you can send them questions. They need to be factual questions. And then coming to the main area of the page, you can see now we have the administrative forms, Part A, and below that, Part B and annexes. So as I've mentioned, Part A has to be completed online. You can download the form to disseminate and collate data in a Word document, for example, but you will then need to come back onto the system and input that data directly into the online form. So let's look at some of the key pages for Part A. And in the system, you click the blue action button in the middle, Edit Forms, and this will log you into a different area of the system, so it does take a minute. You'll then arrive here in Part A, the screenshot on the left of the screen. So to open the different sections, you just press show, or alternatively, you can navigate the form using the links at the top of the page, and then you're in the form. So for the first section, there are only 2 pages. And on this page, you can change your project acronym, input the title, the duration in months, and add keywords. So keywords is something that I want to flag as a quick win. So these are used to match proposals to evaluators. So this is worth some thought and definitely including, but also go beyond the obvious. So for this call, I would add democracy, but also others. So another example might be if you have an interdisciplinary team to include all of those disciplines. So also to note in this first section, which is 1 general information, is the abstract. So if you're successful, this abstract is published onto the Commission website. So please don't include anything confidential. The abstract is also one of the first things that the evaluators will read. So make it punchy and precise. So on to the next page then, either by returning to the table of contents in the blue bar at the top or navigating to the next section, which is participants and contacts in the very top bar. So now, because mine is a test, there is only one participant listed, but when you do yours, there'll be at least 3 participating organisations, and this list will be longer. So this information here will automatically populate from the details you provided earlier in the application system, but this is a helpful summary to see all of the organisations you've included and to make sure you have the right number of countries and roles for each organisation. So when you click Show Participant Details, you'll open a longer form that should connect to the information you provided earlier, and that's the image on the right of my screen currently. Now at the top, I've circled short name. It's helpful to make a note of the short names because you can use these when you're completing Part B, so which is the section with the page limits. So this can be really helpful for text space, particularly as you can see UKRI, writing those 5 words out every time will take up significant space. So this page also includes the details for the nominated main contact person, which department they're in, and the contact details. You'll be able to see and edit the information for the researchers involved from that organisation as well, and that will include their names, gender, nationality, email, and career stage. You'll also be asked to include the role of the organisation and some key achievements such as the top 5 publications, 5 projects, and description of any significant infrastructure that is relevant to the proposed work, call content, and subject of the proposal. Now, this might include the top 3 publications made by your department, which shows why you're taking on this cool topic as subject matter experts. And it might also include that you have access to an archive that is integral to the research you're planning to conduct and to meet the expected outcomes of the call. So on the next admin page within this section, you'll be asked to declare if you have a gender equality plan, which is a requirement for public bodies, research organisations, and higher education institutions applying. So once you've checked or completed this form for one institution, you'll then need to repeat this process for every institution in your consortium. And this can be delegated to institutions themselves, but it is time consuming. So it's best to get this done well in advance if you can. So moving on to the next section then, budget. There are a couple of tips to flag here. Firstly, budget appears in both Part A and Part B. If there are any discrepancies between the two, the Commission will evaluate the budget in Part A, so this form. So looking at the image on the slide then, you'll see some columns have periods or commas. And unfortunately in the UK and for many of our international colleagues, we use these marks to signify hundreds, thousands, and so on. In this case, the figure is in whole euros, so these periods denote cents. So this is reportedly a quite common mistake, and there is nothing that can be done after submission. So please check and double check that this form in Part A is correct. And just to mention, when you open this table initially, it's all zeros, it's blank. I've just inputted some data to show you how it automatically populates in some of the boxes. So the boxes, it's a very not very clear on my screenshot, it's clearer in the system, but the boxes that are white are boxes that you need to input data, and the grey boxes are not editable. So as an example, I've put in 100,000 in the personnel costs, and that's automatically populated the indirect costs, which is the second column that I've circled. So indirect costs are 25%, so the table has added 25k to the budget sheet. So you'll also see that the funding rate column has been completed automatically as well. That's the third column that I've circled. And this automatically populated as 100 because this is a research and innovation action, and as such is funded at 100%. For innovation actions for UKRI, this box would show 70. Now, a very important column to flag under the blue question mark, which I've also circled. This is where the Commission tell you how, you tell the Commission, sorry, how much money you want. To the left of that column, this tells you what they have calculated as the maximum amount you could receive based on the information you've inputted, and that is automatically generated. So you need to copy those numbers, make sure that they're the same, and that will mean that you get the maximum amount of funding, which is what you want. Again, oddly, quite a common mistake is that you go with the numbers that you have rather than taking into account the form that has added numbers automatically. So again, this table will have all the partners from the earlier sections listed here, and each needs to input their budget lines. You also have to declare any income generated by the action, and that's in the last column that I've circled here. An example of this might be a profitable conference, which would need to be declared, and then the Commission would take this figure from the final award amount, but you are allowed to keep IP generated income. So if you need support with completing this form, the best place to start, if you have a university within your consortium or are a university, is to go to your research office. And this is because some of the costing rules are based on your organisation's usual rules. So this might include travel allowances, being able to claim for first-class travel or not, as an example. And if you need further help after this, you're welcome to come to me. And if there's anything I can't help with, I can signpost you onto some additional resources and some of my colleagues, another NCP colleague who looks after the legal and finance aspects of Horizon Europe, and also to our colleagues in Brussels in our UCRO office if you are a subscriber. So finally to say, the main contact from the coordinating organisation can change all the figures in the table. If you're not the coordinator, you can only edit your own institution's lines. So let's look at the next section very quickly. Now, this is the ethics and security, and this page asks for page references from part B of your application, so you might need to come back and complete this once you've completed part B, and that's possible. You can save and come back to this later. And handily, if you've answered a question that needs a page reference, the boxes will highlight in yellow. So I do just want to very quickly flag, I'm conscious of time, that it's in this first page, which is shown in my second screenshot, you'll be asked a question about plans to export data from the EU to non-EU countries, and that does include the UK. So if you're planning, for example, to send data gathered in Germany to the UK for analysis, please tick yes. You'll then be asked to specify the type of personal data and the countries involved, and here you could refer to the data protection and data adequacy agreement between the UK and the EU, and I've included a link to this on the slide. And just to note, please do make sure you've checked the data protection regulations for any other non-EU countries in your consortium. So in this section, you're also asked to complete an ethics self-assessment, and there is guidance in this form and also available via the link I've shared on the slide. And finally, you'll be asked some questions on security, all of which are pretty straightforward, and there is guidance available for those in the system. So once you've completed ethics and security, you then might have another section, which is 5 other questions. You'll be asked to complete this if there are additional details that the Commission needs. But this call, Democracy 0101, there aren't any other questions showing, so I don't have an image to share with you. But I'll then navigate along to the top of the screen to validate results. So as you can see, lots of things in my example form would not pass the validation test, but this is a really handy function because it shows you the errors and warnings, whether it will stop you applying or where you'll be allowed to submit, but it could still harm your application if it's not included. It also tells you which section the error is in and the error description, so you can navigate to it easily. You also have the option to come back to this form at each stage, including this stage, so you can save and exit the form and return to the main page and deal with it later if you need to. And this is the main page that you'll come back to. This is my last slide before we go to the Q&A, and I know we're overrunning slightly, but I will dedicate a few minutes in the break to answering some questions. But just quickly then on this last slide, this is where you can upload part B. This is the main page. So once you've completed part A and uploaded part B, you then need to validate the whole application form. So this is the blue button on the bottom right of the screen. And if there are any actions or errors, there will be a pop-up box with details of what you need to fix and where it is. Now, my colleagues with experience of submitting completed real applications have advised me that you're able to submit multiple times and the system will retain the most recent upload you submit for part B. So you could upload and submit an almost finished version in advance of the deadline. And if you're working to the wire, at least you'll have something in there. Though a word of warning, if you're working to the wire, my NCP colleagues have told me that they've had multiple teams who have obviously worked for months on a proposal, only to miss the deadline because of the time it takes to upload, validate and submit. And that's because the submission time is the time the system completes the processes, not the time that you click submit. And there is always traffic right before the deadline. And just again to confirm, the next deadline for the calls currently open in Cluster 2 is the 7th of February at 4 p.m. UK time. So once the deadline has passed, the Commission have 3 months to share your results with you. And now I do have a couple of slides on the evaluation process, which I'll come to after the break. But first, we'll move to our Q&A. So thank you all for listening. I hope that's been helpful. I know we are slightly over time, but Jamie, if you can identify a couple of questions for me to ask, we'll then stop at maybe 5 past to allow at least a 10-minute break.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. There's been some questions around the start dates for projects. So if they've got to submit by February, when would they be expected to begin, and how would they plan around that?
So that I'm going to talk a little bit about that in the evaluation process after the break. But essentially, it's once the grant agreement has been signed, which is usually within 12 months. So it takes approximately 8 months. So the first 3 months is for the Commission to review. Then the Commission have 5 months to sort out the grant agreements. And then after that, you move into a pre-financing stage. So I do come to that later, but that whole process takes 8 months. And then following that, it's as the Commission have set the deadlines and according to your project plans.
Brilliant. With the funding amounts then, so where it talks about an indicative budget of €3 billion, for example, how likely is that a project that could be funded at, say, 3.5, or should they stick to that sort of indicative budget limit?
I don't know the answer to that question, to be perfectly honest. Most of the projects that I have seen be funded, all of them fit within that budget with a tiny amount of wiggle room, but I will check that and come back to you with an answer.
For those RA projects, do they need to have industry involvement, and also would letters of support be needed for partners as well?
So letters of support is not something that is required for cluster 2. And sorry, the other question was about whether industry has to be involved for research and innovation actions, yeah. Is that right? Industry involvement in projects is helpful when we're thinking about the impact. So what happens after your project, and in applying the results into the real world. So I would say it's helpful, but it's not necessarily a requirement unless it says so in the call text. But it is a helpful partner to have if you have industry partners, because that helps you to show how you're going to input, how to move the results of the project past the end of the project.
And do they have to list in-kind contributions as well from those partners, associate partners?
That's a good question. I will double check that and come back with an answer.
I'll give 2 more if that's okay.
Yeah.
Is there a recommended number of partners or an optimal number, or does that depend totally on the opportunity?
It depends on the opportunity, and it also depends on the main partners. So some institutions have a preference for keeping the consortium small. Sometimes that's easier to manage the communications and how the work is split up, and also your networking. Some consortiums have 15, 16 partners because each of those partners has a specific role to play, and that also might help when we think about geographical diversity of the consortium and the outreach that you're going to be able to achieve through having in-country support. It might also be that, you know, multiple partners have different pieces or different access to different resources that you need, such as access to libraries or archives, etc. It might also be that that you've had this group of team working together previously, and you're building on work that you've already been working on and coming into Horizon Europe together. So there's lots of reasons to have a smaller group, and also lots of reasons to have a larger group, and that really does depend on how you justify that in your application.
Okay, thank you. I think one last one before we go to a break then.
Sure.
A question about the Part A section and where sort of what they have to include. So as a coordinator, would they have to include all applicants' details, or can the partners add their own details to Part A?
So the coordinator will need to add all of the institutions. So using the pick, you put all of those institutions into the Part A form. Once they're in the form, those institutions will be, if you have a main contact person for each of them, that main contact can then come into the form and upload that information themselves.
There were some other questions, but I think we could take a break now and we can pick them up afterwards, yeah?
Yes, that would be perfect. Thank you. Any questions we haven't been able to answer, I will reply in writing after the webinar with answers for those as well. So we're going to take a 10-minute break now with the intention of starting at 2:15. So thank you for joining us for the first half of the webinar, and we'll be back in 10 minutes. Thank you and see you shortly. So thank you everyone for rejoining and welcome back after the brief break. Just to confirm, in case anyone else has recently joined us, this session is being recorded and we will share the slides and the recording along with the supplementary documents after the webinar. So to come back to the agenda for the second half of this webinar, we'll first hear some remarks on Horizon Europe from Professor Christopher Smith, who, as I mentioned earlier, he couldn't join us today, but has kindly recorded a message for us. Then I will briefly cover proposal evaluation, so you know what happens after your proposal is submitted. And then we will welcome Dr. Suzanne Colshaw to share her experiences of successful proposal writing and some top tips and recommendations. So Suzanne is a member of the team who successfully applied within Destination 1 and will also be hosting a Q&A. So please remember to submit your questions in the Q&A function. Then we will welcome Professor Karen Johnston and Dr. Panos Kapotas, who will share their experiences and recommendations for successful Horizon Europe proposals as well. And Karen and Panos are members of a team who successfully applied within Destination 3. So I hope everyone has had a chance to rejoin. I'm going to change my screen to the recording from Professor Christopher Smith, so please bear with me a moment.
I'm Christopher Smith, the Executive Chair of the Arts and Humanities Research Council and also UKRI's International Champion, and I'm absolutely delighted to be with you on this Horizon Europe Cluster 2 webinar. The UK's association with Horizon Europe was signed in December 2023. This bespoke new agreement finalises the UK's association to Horizon Europe and Copernicus. It's a signature between the partners which formalises an agreement reached in September 2023 following some intensive negotiations to reach a bespoke deal. And for many of us, it's an extraordinarily important moment in re-establishing our linkages with this critical research and innovation network, a partnership which has of long-standing and of immense importance to all of us. Our association to Horizon Europe means that UK researchers and businesses can participate confidently in the world's largest programme of research cooperation worth over £80 billion, alongside EU, Norwegian, New Zealand, Canadian and Israeli colleagues, and with other countries like Korea and Japan also looking to join. The agreement means that UK researchers will be able to fully participate in the Horizon Europe programme on the same terms as researchers from other associated countries. And now we will once again be able to lead consortia from the 2024 work programmes onwards. This means that the Cluster 2 opportunities within the 7th February deadline will be funded by the UK's association. And the UK government is committed to restoring the UK's position as partner of choice in Horizon Europe. UK institutions have historically been hugely successful in securing funding through EU programmes, and our ambition in the UK government, but also in UKRI, is to build on previous success and make this association truly impactful. So why is Cluster 2 important? Well, the UK Association is an opportunity to bring together the best and brightest from right across Europe and the world to work together to tackle some of our greatest shared challenges, from climate change to global health. Cluster 2 is important as it aims to enhance democratic governance and citizen participation, to safeguard and promote cultural heritage, to respond to and shape multifaceted social, economic, technological and cultural transformations, to mobilise multidisciplinary expertise of European social sciences and humanities, and to provide evidence-based policy options for socially just and inclusive European recovery. As Executive Chair of AHRC, the Arts and Humanities Research Council, the aim of Cluster 2 mobilises multidisciplinary expertise, mobilising multidisciplinary expertise of European social sciences and humanities is, of course, particularly relevant to me and to our community. It's sometimes forgotten that European funding is the largest source of direct grant funding to UK arts and humanities departments, even larger than AHRC. And this webinar is an example of how the UK and EU are working together to ensure that UK businesses and researchers and their international counterparts seize the opportunity the UK Association brings. Now, we know that we're building on success, not only in the previous framework programs, but even through this difficult transition period. As of the end of 2023, we've awarded over 3,000 grants worth over £1.5 billion through the guarantee process. And that guarantee remains active, and we'll be awarding new grants right to the end of their time, and anything that isn't falling into Work Package 2024. Over 80 Cluster 2 UK participants have been funded to date through the UK Government Horizon Europe Guarantee Scheme, and you can find examples on the UKRI website. What we're doing here in this webinar is to bring people together to look at the opportunities and also to raise awareness of the substantial support that we offer across the UK. UKRI supports the RI community through the family of national contact points. These are national advisors appointed by government to support UK organisations to participate successfully in Horizon Europe, and they deliver events and advisory services for the entire sector. This webinar is a great example of the work they do. Since 2021, there have been over 400 attendees at webinars organised by the National Contact Point for Cluster 2, showcasing the strong demand from the social science and humanities community. A number of attendees went on then to receive Horizon Europe funding, and this shows these are really successful events. And we're working closely with DSIP to contribute to programme committees, with backward-handing programme committees. Success rates of UK applicants in Cluster 2 remain high, and there's a great alignment between the opportunities offered by Cluster 2 and the investments which are being made by AHRC and ESRC. So I really want to encourage anybody who's in relevant organisations to sign up for the UKRO's portal, UK Research Office in Brussels, our key centre. Reach out to the network of national contact points for support in applying. And above all, I'm really, really excited to see what your proposals and your ideas will bring. Thinking about democracy, thinking about cultural heritage, thinking about transformation society, what could be of more importance? But these are things that we will only be able to solve as a community, transcending any national boundaries. So let's get to work and let's really make the difference through these applications that we want to make as people committed to arts, humanities and social science and their relevance today. I hope you have a brilliant webinar. I look forward to seeing the results in due course. Thank you so much.
Many thanks. And for the encouragement and support for our continued engagement with Horizon Europe. It's really is a fantastic opportunity and an exciting time to be applying, particularly following the UK's association to Horizon Europe that came into effect on the 1st of January this year. So I'm just going to come back to our presentation slide, so bear with me a moment. Okay, so before the break, we covered the proposal writing and submission process. And so to conclude the cycle, let's look at the process after submission, which is shown in this diagram. So proposals in Horizon Europe are evaluated by independent external experts against clear criteria set out in the work programme. And then the categories that we've already covered earlier: excellence, impact, and implementation. So there are a minimum of 3 experts who evaluate each proposal individually, and that's the individual evaluation stage. These individuals then come together to agree on common feedback and a common opinion, and they use the feedback from their initial review and the scores from that proposal from that first stage. So following a consensus group, The next stage is a panel of experts for the topic. We'll agree the ranking of the proposals, and the panel is selected per topic to ensure that there is consistency in the scoring. So during this phase, decisions are made on which proposals are retained for funding and invited to start the grant agreement preparation, or whether the proposal will be placed on a reserve list, whether it's rejected because of low funding availability or rejected because of lower quality. So the panel review is also the point where final decisions are made on proposals with the same ranking. So this is done when a consensus can't be reached at the earlier stage and there is limited funding remaining. So I'll share some comments on this in the next slide, but just to close the loop, after the panel review, we move into the finalisation stage, which is where the Commission completes the ranking list. So when the application comes up for panel review, there are a couple of proposals which have, when there are a couple of proposals that have the same score, but the funding availability is limited, the evaluators must use additional criteria to decide who should be awarded. So in addition to the criteria under excellence, impact and quality and efficiency of the implementation, the application will also be reviewed on these 5 criteria on the screen. So that includes topic spread, excellence and impact scores, and impact is ranked first for innovation actions and excellence is ranked first for research and innovation actions. So that's something to note. You'll also be scored on gender balance among researchers listed in the project, which links to the gender equality and inclusiveness cross-cutting theme that we touched on earlier as well. You'll also be scored on geographical diversity, and if further prioritisation is needed, that's at the panel's discretion. So linked on the slide, you'll see the general annexes, and there's more information on these criteria listed on pages 26 and 27. I've also shared a link to the Commission's published briefing slides for evaluators, which I recommend taking a look at. And just to confirm, I'll be sharing these slides and the recording after the webinar, so you'll have access to these links soon. So let's look quickly at the evaluation timeline. So this slide shows the process your proposal goes through after submission, and this is a fully electronic process. So the Commission, as I've mentioned before the break, they have 3 months to come back to the coordinator with the outcomes of the application and with feedback. So for this round, the application deadline on the 7th of February, you should have outcomes and feedback in May. So if you have been successful, you'll be then invited to the grant preparation stage, and the grant agreement preparation has to take place within 8 months from the submission date. So for this round, with the deadline on the 7th of February, this will likely happen in October. After this, the grant is signed and you move through to the next stage. And I'm going to leave us there. There isn't unfortunately a time for a Q&A on this section, but if you have questions about the evaluation phase, please do still drop them into the Q&A and I'll share a response after the webinar in writing. So now we're going to hear from current grant holders who are going to share their experiences and tips for writing successful Horizon Europe proposals. So firstly, I'd like to welcome Dr. Suzanne Culshaw, who is the Research Fellow in the School of Education at the University of Hertfordshire and a member of the ACE project. So over to you, Suzanne. I'll stop sharing so you can share your screen. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, lovely. Wow, what a privilege I think it is to be here, really, as somebody who can speak from the other side of the application process, and we're now nearly a year into the ACE project. So welcome from me. I'm Dr. Suzanne Culshaw. I'm a Research Fellow on the ACE project at the University of Hertfordshire here in the UK. I wanted to highlight this because I think this is important maybe for some of the attendees in the room, that I'm an early career researcher. I completed my PhD at the University of Hertfordshire in October 2019. I then worked, I'm just going to put my timer on actually. I worked part-time as a research fellow on an Erasmus Plus project, which is called Enables, for 2 years following my PhD. And what really worked for us as an ACE lead partner was the fact that my involvement in writing the application was funded by a British Academy Pump Priming Award. I worked exclusively on the ACE application part-time from December 2021 to mid-March 2022. I worked with Professor Philip Woods, who had been one of my PhD supervisors and my line manager in the Enables project, and Dr. now Professor Karen Smith. Philip was the principal investigator, Karen was the co-applicant, and I provided what's termed research assistance. So just quickly then, the ACE project is a 3-year project which started in April 2023 and involves 6 partners from the UK, Croatia, Finland, Germany, Latvia, and Portugal. We were awarded just short of 2.8 million euros, and we were awarded 15 out of 15 in the evaluation. And I'll share some of the feedback from that evaluation later on in the presentation. So this is the only slide that has as much text on, I promise. And this is actually the only time I'll really talk about the substance of the project. It's a really interesting and innovative project, and we're just about to embark upon the research phase, which is particularly exciting. And if I may, I'll just read what the project is about. So democracy isn't simply a technical process that involves you learning about its history, principles, rules, and institutions. Democracy is a way of governing and a way of relating to each other that is a here and now experience. Engaging with others democratically and acting as a democratic citizen involves your feelings and your sense of what is ethically important and to be valued. It is important to learn about democracy. However, too much education for democracy places the main emphasis on cognitive learning. Too little gives center stage to a fundamental dimension of learning, that is, the aesthetic and embodied nature of learning. Yet to understand and get a feel for democracy, you have to live it and explore it in ways that help you become aware of your and others' feelings, values, and ethical concerns when acting democratically. The ambition of this project is to enhance and transform the role of aesthetic and embodied learning in education for democracy. The intention is to design an innovative aesthetic and embodied pedagogical framework, which has an impact on the practice of education for democracy through associated guides to practice. The project is developing and testing prototypes of the framework and guides in differing phases of education and national contexts. This will be done through groundbreaking participatory research. The outcome of the research will be a research-based framework with supporting guides to practice that inspires and activates new ways of educating for democracy. So interestingly, of course, the essence of our project is about aesthetic and embodied learning, but we had to put that into words on an application form. And that's what the rest of my presentation is going to be about. So I will be covering the application process itself. I think it's important to say that I'm going to talk mainly about part B of the application. That's what I was most involved with. Navigating the process, what we learned along the way, and a couple of stumblings along the way. I'll talk through a sample section that I was heavily involved in. I'll give you a few specifics, so some very specific details, and then I'll reflect back. And this has been an excellent opportunity to reflect back on the process. I'll talk about success because we were successful, and then I'll open the space for some questions. So I hope that meets your expectations. So I'm a real fan of imagery and kind of beautiful images, and I hope to be able to use some images in this presentation. The idea of this image is that we found that the ACE project really came from an acorn, the Enables project, which was a relatively small project and has grown into this larger oak tree of a project, the ACE project. So what I want to mention here is that this smaller project, Enables, paved the way for this larger, more substantial project. So Enables was £244,000 with 5 partners. The UH was a project coordinator. University of Hertfordshire was the project coordinator. And there is some overlap in terms of the UK team members on both Enables and ACE, myself being one of those. There is a mix of experience and expertise within the UK team. So we've got professors, readers, and I'm an early career researcher, as I mentioned. We thought it was important to have a geographical spread and to balance where is the expertise in this field of aesthetic and embodied learning for democracy. We thought about socio-cultural differences as well as practically the potential for effective collaboration, and we asked for recommendations from people we knew in Portugal, for example. I think it's important to emphasise that the project coordinator carries a sizable responsibility, and whilst each partner needs to be 100% kind of aware of their eligibility, it is the project coordinator that carries the ultimate responsibility. And just an aside, we submitted an application recently to a different funder, and it fell at the first post because one of the partners wasn't 100% eligible. So we noticed a gap. We noticed a gap, and we were motivated to kind of take our findings from Enables further. So what was important along the way is that you don't work in silos, you work in networks, and the importance of relationships. So I'll talk about that a little bit. So I was lucky enough to be funded to work exclusively part-time on the application process. It was a British Academy Pump Priming Award. We applied initially for £5,000. Most of that money was for research assistants, me. And then we were able to add an additional £2,500 to develop a project impact pathway. So I worked it out earlier on, and I was funded for a total of, hang on a sec, 34 days across that 3.5–4 month period. So we thought it was really important to plan backwards from impact, because from the guidance that we were reading, it was really important that impact was at the heart of the application. So we were putting dissemination and exploitation at the heart of the application. And we decided on a mix of established relationships and new partners. What was really important was to assign responsibilities within our research team. So Philip very much kind of focused on the education for democracy substance, if you like. Karen was very much focused on the impact, and I was very much focused on the methodology. We connected with potential partners very early on, and I think really important in terms of relationships was that I reached out to a lot of colleagues in-house at the University of Hertfordshire to draw on their expertise, and also made use of the external support. So an example of the in-house expertise that I kind of benefited from was in terms of the gender dimension, and I see there's a question about that, which I'm happy to take later. EDI, so equality, diversity and inclusion, data management, and the finance and costings of the application. Externally, we were hugely supported by the national contact point, who at the time was called Annie, and I'll tell you more about her and the invaluable support and guidance she provided later on. So, piecing the puzzle together. So it feels very much when you're doing the application that you're working in small sections and perhaps independently and whatever, and then when you start putting it together, you start to see the whole picture. It's like a process of becoming, and it takes time. So what were the learnings and the what were the learnings and the stumblings as we went along? Well, the application form itself is a bit of a beast. And it's never too early to make a start. And I'm very aware that this webinar is for a call that's very soon, but perhaps there are people in the room who are looking to submit at a later date. We started approximately 5 months before the deadline, and we needed that time. So it's never too early to make a start. These are deliberately provocative statements, really. You don't know everything, and you have to accept that you don't know everything and that you can't do everything. And that's why it really is important to draw on in-house support from colleagues across your institution and from external support. As I said, Annie was our national contact point. Sections can be divvied up, but it is a team effort. So it's quite useful sometimes to think in terms of working on separate sections and then sharing them with each other and then splitting it up again. And it was really important that we were engaging with partners early on and very often. And there is a lot of guidance, and it's not always easy to know what to prioritise, but you really do need to leave enough time to finalise the application. There's finite space for each section, and you need to be clear, concise, and organise the space well. It needs to look good. You can use visuals and tables and numbering and headings to break up how the application looks and to ease readability. Remember that people are going to read this and you want them to find it easy to read. I haven't put this as a separate bullet point, but we did stumble a little bit over the uncertainty of whether the UK could be the lead partner. As it is, we couldn't, but I haven't mentioned it, and I won't mention it very much here because it's not relevant for the current application process, but that was a bit of a stumbling block for us. I'm now going to spend a little bit of time talking through a sample section, which I led on. And I'll just give you an overview of kind of the size of part B of the application. I hope that's useful for you to look at. I'm going the wrong way, sorry. Okay, so our total page number for part B was 45 pages. And of that, 18 pages were on methodology. So yes, excellence, methodology, impact on work packages was the total for part B, but 40% of that part B was methodology, which I led on. And so I thought it would be useful perhaps to talk about how I approached working with that section in particular. So the Times Roman stuff, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, is a screenshot from the actual application, and we divided it into these sections because we thought it was really important to have headings, clear headings, and an overview. The box in the right-hand corner gives an idea of what I was doing as part of that section. So I was theorizing in terms of the methodology. I did a lot of really deep thinking, referencing the literature, drawing on knowledge, and coming up with a coherent research design. I was planning the project itself as part of the methodology, and I was building on partners' prior experience and our own experience from previous project that I'd been involved in. I was looking at the expertise across the consortium and building that into the research design. I was liaising with the EDI team here in the University of Hertfordshire, and I was liaising with the research office and doing lots and lots of other stuff as well. So if you think methodology, if it was like a PhD dissertation or whatever, you would not necessarily expect there to be a section on open science and data management. So think broadly and really, really read the guidance carefully on what that particular section needs to include. I started by attending a webinar like this one, and I connected the national contact point, who, as I said, was called Annie. And the areas of advice that I got were on the work packages, advice on how many, feedback on draft work packages, information on the dissemination and exploitation aspect of the application, the UK's role and contingency planning if we couldn't be the lead partner. I remember emailing Annie and asking her which guidance should I be prioritizing, because it's such a big lot of guidance to take on board. I asked very specifically, what do I need to focus on? Yeah, and I think it's really important that, just as a reminder, don't work in isolation. So while I led on this section, it was important for me to be reaching out to the networks of people in-house and beyond. Your institution has its experts and specialists. So I reached out to our research office, the research impact team, the EDI team, and to colleagues who had experience of considering and planning gender dimensions for projects like this, data management colleagues, and I got advice on open access and the associated costs of open access. So it is important, to be clear on who is taking a lead. And I took a lead on methodology, but we shared these sections with each other to make sure that they were linking with the other sections and making sense more holistically. So a few specifics then. I thought it would be useful perhaps to have some actual numbers. So we had formally 18 project meetings. We had one meeting with all partners and then 3 separate country meetings where the UK met with individual countries. And it is incredible how many emails were pinging to and fro over those 4 months. We had at least 8 substantive email exchanges with our national contact point and 1 Teams meeting with her. And she offered to review our draft application and gave very specific feedback. And I really can't emphasize how valuable this particular process was. So I have, on the next slide, I've got some extracts from the feedback that we got from our national contact point. So that was Annie, as I've said. So I was very grateful. So she said it was no problem at all. She was happy to have a look. Then she was very specific about a bit of repetition in the application, giving a precise number of publications, talking about how to label the tasks. I thought that was a really good idea because then I could cross-refer the task numbers. And then at the end, she said she hoped it was useful. Believe me, it was really useful. And then it was very reassuring to hear her say, I think it's looking great. And the points above are really only minor comments. So it was useful, specific, focused, targeted and encouraging. And I think that was really, really valuable for us at the right time. So finally, then I'm going to look back. So this invitation to be part of this event today has been a fantastic opportunity to reflect and to share some practical stuff with you. So some final kind of thoughts before I share some of the evaluation. A lot of this sounds obvious, and if I was sitting where you're sitting, you think, well, yes, she is stating the obvious, but it is really important to know the application process inside out. Keep track of your versions. I looked earlier on at my various files, and there are so many versions of the methodology section alone. Keep the language accessible. Remember who the readers, the evaluators might be. And it was in a webinar like this that someone said that don't expect the evaluators to have English as their first language. And that was really, really a piece of information that I took away and took on board. Balance your time between the substance of the project and the substance of the form. By which I mean, yes, you've got to understand what your project is about. What is it that you are contributing? What is it that you've got to offer in your application? And then think about how you're going to manage the practical process of filling in the form. As lead partner, as the applicant, take responsibility and have very specific deadlines. We had absolute deadlines, and then we had other kinds of deadlines, and we found it was really important for partners who are not working on this full time and who are committed to the project but haven't yet kind of benefited from it. Be very clear what your expectations are of them and give very clear deadlines, and that worked well for us. Other little kind of reflections from me. It is important, we felt, to assign lead roles for particular parts of the application, but you also need to liaise really closely. Accept your limitations, so ask for help. And that you can do that by using resources that are available to you in-house, in your own institutions and externally. Get partners on board, but accept that they are not as available perhaps as you are during the application process. Try to use jargon-free language. Include visuals if you can and tables if you can, and leave plenty of time for submission. I remember we had a deadline that we wanted to submit by, and then it took us more than a day to submit, and there were kind of toings and froings with our finance team about some of the costings. So leave plenty of time for submission, because things can always go wrong, or there might be things missing that block your ability to submit. So I'm just going to finish then. I hope I'm okay time-wise. On success, because we were successful, and it's really lovely to have had the opportunity to reflect back on this. And so I said I'd share some of our evaluation feedback, which we got in the late July. So we'd submitted in April, and this was late July. And as Kim said earlier, there are 3 evaluation criteria, each with a possible 5 points. So excellence, impact, and implementation. And these are direct quotes from the evaluation. The objectives are clear and well formulated and realistically achievable. The proposal is well written and clearly presented. The research strategy is described in a clear way. The proposed methodology is convincing, credible, and innovative. Consideration of the gender dimension runs through the entire part and is exceptionally good. Open science practices and data management are well addressed. The proposed pathways, impact pathways, are well described and credible and well articulated. And can I just say, I knew absolutely, well, pretty much next to nothing about data management before I started writing this application. Potential barriers to exploitation are considered thoroughly. The scale and significance of the project is credibly estimated and quantified. A strong communication plan is listed and explained, and the dissemination actions are addressed very well. And that was because we put the impact pathway at the center of our application. We took the guidance very seriously on that. We used the impact pathway templates, and we used feedback from our national contact point. So strengths were seen as the work plan description, the time schedules, and the resources list. The consortium itself brings together a very experienced group of researchers and institutions. and the operational capacity of the applicants is very good. Each partner has a clearly defined and valid role. So we got 15 out of 15. Apparently that's very rare. And we are now working on this project, which is 3 years, 2.8 million euros on a subject that is of great interest and relevance to me. So I will stop. I can be contacted about the project further or about anything to do with the process, but I will stop sharing and pass back to Kim.
Thank you, Suzanne. There's some fantastic tips in there, and I'm so grateful that you've given us the detail about your processes and the specific examples and even the visuals that you've shared with us and the feedback you've received. That is so helpful. I'm just going to come back and share my screen very quickly. And then we're going to move into the Q&A. Jamie, I think we have 8 or 9 minutes if you're happy to select some questions for us.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think you've answered a lot of the questions I think I was going to ask, really, to kick this off, really. So in terms of some of the things you wish you'd known before you started to engage with Pillar 2, I think you expressed quite clearly sort of how through the process you learned a lot on data management, how you learned around data pathways, how you learned about just the added value of working, getting the support from the NCP. Was there anything else you wanted to draw out or emphasize in terms of things that you wish you'd known before you started on this, getting involved with EU funding in Pillar 2?
And I now wonder whether I could have done more to understand the finance side of it. I kind of just let that happen. Philip was very much into sorting out the costings and the finance. And I think now, if I was kind of leading an application myself, next time I'd want to kind of know a little bit about the finance and the costings. I think I just accepted that he knew what he was doing, and yeah, and I didn't learn anything as such. I think so. Yeah, that's not a regret. It's just a reflection, really.
When it came to sort of working with your consortium partners and thinking about workload management and distribution and well, both the workload and also sort of the geographical diversity of those partners as well for case studies, how did you manage that selection and then delivery side of it?
So in terms of the six partners, some of whom we've worked before, we did want a geographical spread. We did feel that we were very North and Eastern Europe focused in the initial stages. And so we reached out via a colleague who used to work at University of Hertfordshire to Portugal, and she contacted her colleagues in the equivalent of the Open University in Portugal, and we built up a connection with them. They have a very strong education for democracy practice in Portugal, as it happens. And so, and they were very interested in primary education, and were also interested in narrative techniques. So that's quite a kind of serendipitous way of saying, kind of, we looked at a map and said, it feels a little bit too north and east, let's go a little bit further south. And then we used existing networks and connections and recommendations, really. So yeah. I hope that answers that question. I think there was another bit, wasn't there, about case study areas. Yeah. Most of us, so the 6 partners are all, apart from one country, are working within their own nations on their case studies, but the German partner is actually reaching out into Italy and Austria, I think, as well. So don't think that your cases necessarily have to be exclusively in your own national context, although of course there will be ethical considerations and, you know, and different data protection kind of considerations if you're working out of your own national context.
Yeah, thank you. And in terms of again the financing side of it, obviously you work with your finance office and others. Yeah. But how did you sort of work out those calculations? Was it basically working with the finance officers in the relevant countries to come up with that, with the relevant budgets put into the form?
So, yeah, I think I don't know where we heard this, but we heard that we thought that 3 projects would be funded and that there would be 9 million euros available. So we kind of worked out, you know, wobbly hand moment. We thought, well, asking for more than 3 million would probably not be a good idea. So that was a kind of really basic kind of calculation that we did to start off with. We knew we were 6 partners. At the time, we were going to be the project coordinator. And so you know, in terms of work package leadership and whatever, we felt that we were going to allocate more for us. As it happens, we're not the project coordinator, but, you know, let's not talk about that. And different countries, we kind of left partners up to work out how much research time they wanted to invest into the project and work with their finance team. So when I said about networks rather than silos, it was really important to get those partners working with their finance teams and then to collate it back as the kind of the coordinating applicant. So, and don't, I guess, depending on what time of year it is, you know, there can be different periods of summer holidays at different times. In Finland, for example, they tend to go on holiday in June. So just to take those kind of socio-cultural differences into consideration and to be quite clear in terms of your expectations and deadlines.
Brilliant, thank you. And in terms of the, we've had quite a lot of questions there on gender equality and gender diversity requirements. Could you just, again, build on that in terms of how you found it, both at the application stage, assessment stage, and also then reflecting back on the delivery of the project as well? Yeah,
so we were praised in the evaluation for the way that the gender dimension was taken kind of seriously throughout the whole application, and that, you know, that was good because I'd spent time with the EDI team and with colleagues who had more experience than I did on that. What was clear is that we were going way beyond the composition of the research teams. As it happens in education for democracy, there does tend to be a bit of a female dominance as researchers. But we were going beyond that and looking at things like accessibility for participants, because ours is a participatory action research methodology. So we were looking at making our research sites accessible at times of the day where people could go, offering hybrid options and online options. So the gender dimension actually kind of really became more of an EDI option. I remember writing into the application about the use of pronouns and how we were going to kind of consider that. And now that we're at the research design phase, it is something that we're discussing across the consortium. So it was important at the time of the application, and now it is being put into practice.
And we've had also a lot of questions there on subcontracting and the inclusion of subcontractors. For your project, did you include them, or if you didn't, why not?
Well, I was looking at this question earlier on. I was grateful to have this question in advance, and I'm not sure whether we went down the subcontracting route, but we do have an external expert, so I think that we might have done that as a subcontractor, but I don't feel confident giving that as a substantive answer. But we do have an external expert, and the role of that external expert is to kind of advise us as a critical friend to the project, and we've also got an ethics expert as well. So we've got these kind of people who are on the periphery of the project. They aren't involved in the research directly, but are externally kind of critiquing and assessing and supporting and challenging us, which is turning out to be really valuable. So I don't know if that's a subcontractor or not. So I can't answer that one, I'm afraid.
Yeah, again, because we've had a lot of questions about that, and also we've had questions around timelines to do with the startup process as well. And obviously, your experience with Susan a bit different from going forward. What will happen? So I think what's really best there is if Kim collates these questions, and when she sends out the presentations and recording, just give a bit more context and clarity around the subcontractors and also the startup process as well. And also, if anyone wants to then have further conversations with Kim, please do. One final question for myself. I can't see any other questions coming in, but there was we heard from the European Commission earlier in the webinar, and they were talking. I'm really glad they were speaking so clearly about SSH integration and the importance of social sciences and humanities now within Horizon Europe, and how they can be integrated across all projects, or as many as possible, really. How did you find that from both your academic backgrounds, but also when you're working with colleagues internationally? Because obviously certain different countries also approach SSH in different ways as well. So how did you come up with common approaches?
I'm not sure I caught some of that. So
I'll repeat it again, son. So with the SSH integration focus within Horizon Europe, how did you find it within your project with regard to sort of setting the project up, but also recognizing that different countries have different perspectives when it comes to SSH?
there's a section in the application that asked us to talk about that. And I remember that was quite a job of work, compiling kind of not just CVs from people, but also their publications and their kind of areas of interest. And then that's one thing maybe that we would do differently now, is perhaps spend longer on that and looking for kind of overlaps and then kind of slight differences and things. I'm very visual. I could imagine having a kind of a bit of a Venn diagram or some kind of diagram to illustrate that better in the application. But I mean, we've got political scientists, we've got feminist methodology specialists, with but I think what we've all got in democracy is the thing that connects us. Arts-based and embodied methods connect us, and education in the broadest sense, because we've got people who are working with primary years, so early years settings, but then we're moving into adult learning and organizational learning. So we've got a very broad spectrum of experience across the consortium, which is on the one hand challenging because there are so many kind of considerations, but it's also very enriching as well. So I hope that now answers that question. Sorry for the delay there.
No, it's fine. No, thank you very much. We're going to have to hand back over to Kim, but thank you very much, Suzanne. Really appreciate that.
You're very welcome. Thanks for the invitation.
Yes, so thank you so much for your questions, and thanks again, Suzanne, for joining us and sharing all of your experiences and tips with us. There's some really great takeaways there for prospective applicants and also for me. So now I am going to hand over to our next and final speakers today. So I'd like to welcome Professor Karen Johnston, Professor of Organisational Studies at the University of Portsmouth, and Dr. Panos Kapotas, who is the Reader in Equality and Human Rights Law and Associate Head of Research and Innovation at the University of Portsmouth, and both members of the Rewiring Project. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment so that I can pass over to you. And I am really looking forward to hearing more about your experiences and the different aspects of your proposal that made you successful.
Thank you, Kim. If you can enable the host so that we can share our screen, please. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great. So I'd like to introduce myself, but in the interest of time, I'll just move on very quickly. My name is Karen Johnston. I'm a professor at the University of Portsmouth, and I'll just hand over to my colleague, Panos. I'm hoping you're there because I can't see you on the screen.
Thank you, Karen. I am here, and thank you, Kim, for inviting us. I'm Panos Kapotas. Kim has already introduced us, so I think it would probably be more beneficial to everybody if we went straight to the point, especially after Suzanne's excellent presentation.
Yeah, I think also in the interest of time, we're not going to repeat what Suzanne said. And if you do want to know more about our project, there is the link to the project website. Our project is about gender equality, essentially, and its title is Realizing Girls and Women Inclusion, Representation and Empowerment. And we're not going to talk about the project, but we're going to talk about our top tips. And I think our first top tip would be a title, and a catchy title, and also an acronym that encapsulates your project. And I'm not being facetious here, but when I say we decided on the acronym of Rewiring, because our whole project was adopting a transformative approach to institutions to increase the representation of women and girls and empower. Just moving on quickly, we sort of had a discussion, Panos and I, we categorized, reflecting on our experience, we categorized our top tips as the 4 Ps: people, proposal, policy and practical relevance, and pay. So I'm going to hand over to Panos to talk about people.
Thank you, Karen. I should probably say that it's not a coincidence that we're starting with people. Both Karen and myself thought that probably the most important takeaway in hindsight that we would like to, or we would have liked to have from a webinar like this, when we were in a position of attending this webinar, preparing for the Horizon application, would be to consider very carefully and very clearly who we are selecting as members of the team. Now, obviously, if you're the consortium lead, you need to think about the key factors that you've already heard about and have already been identified in the course of this webinar, from gender balance and geographic spread to the interdisciplinarity of the project. It is absolutely crucial, of course, to pick the right consortium partners that can deliver on parts, on aspects of the project that you're putting together. But I think it is also absolutely crucial that you pick the right individuals, the right people that will fit in the right team. And this applies both to your internal team and to the wider consortium team. Part of picking the right people, and arguably one of the most significant success factors for our project, for the Rewiring project application, was the project manager that our consortium lead, the University of Utrecht, hired on a 0.8 FTE contract for 8 months leading up to the application. So this will give you a sense of how long it took from point zero, from when the consortium was actually put together until the point of the deadline for the application. Investing in professional project management is something that Suzanne has already talked about. So I'm not going to reiterate the points that she already made. But I think it is important to highlight that the way the consortium was put up, at least for the Rewiring project, was put together, at least for the Rewiring project, involved a lot of thinking that went into finding the right members of the team, people who were not just experts in the particular area of research, the particular area of work, but also people who were passionate about this project, people who were keen on adopting the same work ethos, people who were keen on being flexible and agile. And I think I should probably end with the word trust. I think the most important building block of the work ethos of the project, and in my mind, probably one of the most important factors in the success of the application, was that it was possible early on to build trust, both internally within our own team in Portsmouth, but also across the consortium. This was necessary because it enabled us to have the agility that was required at times during the preparation phase of the application process to meet challenges that are, I think, quite common, including the fact that we had to switch one of our consortium partners midway through the application. Karen, I think this is over to you to talk about the actual proposal.
Yeah. Well, Susanna's presentation was great, so I'm not going to repeat some of the things she said. Now, an obvious point, and we all say this, for those of us at universities, we always tell students to answer the exam question. You have to interpret the call accurately. Sometimes academics have an idea, or researchers have an idea of what they want to do, and they try and fit it into the call. It's important to actually address each aspect of the call. And I'll just give a simple example here, in that there was a line in the call that said it was desirable to include an African partner. So European calls meant you have to include an African partner. And so fortunately we had links in South Africa, and also there was a justification for including South Africa as part of the consortium because of the higher rates of gender-based violence. So there was an objective reason as well to include South Africa, and of course there were gender experts in the country that the consortium had worked with before. Also, interpreting the call quite accurately, the European Commission may have in the call words like or, and, should. That actually means that they want that to be addressed in the call. So we had something like it should have analysis at different levels. And what that meant was that we should analyze gender equality at different levels. And we took an institutional approach as well as a sector approach. And also we decided on the sectors, linking it to priority areas within the European Commission. So we knew the European Commission had a priority area of green economy and sustainability. So that's one of the sectors we were going to look at. And that offered value for money because we were not looking at gender across institutions at different levels, but also across sectors and sectors where the European Commission had priorities. Go beyond the state of the art. This is an obvious point as well, but what is unique about your project? Or what is unique about your idea? What is different? How does your research really push the boundaries and is innovative and goes beyond what is already known? For example, in our project, the European Commission knows that there's gender inequality. They know the representation in various levels and institutions. So they didn't want to know that again. They wanted us to tell us what we were going to do differently. And our proposal was really to transform institutions. And so that's the innovative aspect and also a direct link to impact, pathway to impact. And if you want to see what has already been done, a good site is the Cordis website, and I've included a link to that. And I know the slides will be shared. So do look at other projects that have been done before, and you'll get a sense of what you could do differently. Also, Cordis is quite a good site if you're looking for experts in the area. You can see who has been successful at projects already, and you can potentially shop for project partners. So you may be familiar already with experts in the area. You may have worked with experts in the area, and you already have that level of trust, as Panos has said. But maybe you need some added value, like an additional methodology or some expertise, and so you can look there. The European Commission has a number of events that they host, and they've mentioned the webinars that you can have access to. I strongly encourage attending these events because you'll get a sense of not only the priority areas, but also how to apply. And the national contacts, UKRI, and specifically Brussels are really useful. These offices, they are tapped into what is happening in the European Commission. Also, I know a lot of people start writing section B with, they just start writing what the objectives and so on. We had a consortium meeting and we decided what was going to be our thematic approach, what questions we wanted to answer, and what was going to be aims and objectives. So we had a broad idea. But then we started with the work packages first. And so each expert institution and experts wrote the work packages, but we didn't work in silos. We had almost a peer review of each other's work packages. We were intimate with each other's work packages. We came together and we discussed the work packages. And then it made it very easy from a bottom up to actually populate the other areas, because then we knew exactly how many person months we would need on certain tasks. We knew how the whole project fitted together. And then the graphics and all the other tables flowed quite nicely from that work package, because you're actually saying, this is what we're going to do, and these are the tasks, and these are the deliverables. So just moving on to the policy and relevance, Panos.
Thank you, Karen. I think that this builds on to what Karen has already been saying, especially in view of the outputs and of the outcome of the deliverables and the impact. Let me spend a minute talking a bit about the rewiring project in particular, in order to give you some context. So at the heart of the project is a common approach that cuts across all of the work packages. We all adopt a transformative equality approach that matches the calls and the funders' requirement for the projects, the successful projects, to be able to deliver practical solutions to existing problems of gender inequalities across the spectrum of different social activities. Now, it is this transformative equality approach that has led us to ensure that the design of the different work packages would take into account, or would incorporate rather, three layers, three levels: the institutional, the experiential, and the symbolical. So we have 4 work packages that look at different concrete areas through an interdisciplinary lens, and also taking into account intersectionality. Karen and I and the rest of our team at the University of Portsmouth are leading in work package 4, which is on gender inequalities in employment in the workplace. But across these 4 work packages, the idea is that we're working together as a consortium, that we're drawing insights from the expertise of everyone in the consortium. And this is reflected on the way the allocation of person months that Karen is going to talk about has taken place, has been designed. Now, why is this crucial for the design of our deliverables? Because in addition to the strong and continuous peer review process that started with our application process, with putting together our application within the consortium, so the strong internal peer review was coupled with the awareness, if I may put it this way, from all members of the team, all participating institutions, all consortium partners, but also individual members that met virtually. I think it's fair to say at least once a month in the leading up to the application deadline. The awareness and the realization that our outputs need to be concrete and specific. So we wanted innovation, we wanted outputs that are innovative, but we also wanted to showcase that we are not reinventing the wheel. We're going beyond what is already known, as Karen said, but in order to do that, we take into account through some of our deliverables, including, for instance, systematic literature reviews of what is already known. And we're trying to offer specific solutions for the gaps that continue to exist, taking into account work that has already been done by colleagues in various Horizon projects over the last few years. Now, one of the most important dimensions of turning this from theory into actual practice was the way we engaged with our stakeholders, especially the key stakeholders. We've put the OECD as an example on the slide here. What we tried to do from the outset, and by outset I mean from the application process, was to engage stakeholders not just notionally, not just in order to add them to our application, but as co-creators, with the commitment on our part and on theirs that if the application is successful, we will continue to work in a process of reflective equilibrium with them in order to make sure that the deliverables meet the requirements of the needs or the requirements of the stakeholders. A very important role in this regard was also reserved for the advisory board. So we discussed quite extensively, I might say, who we wanted to approach as members of our advisory board. because we wanted to be able to tap into not just the expertise of the advisory board, but also their ability to connect us with stakeholders during the project, for the duration of the project, and even after the project, as the legacy of the deliverables, and in view of the continuous societal impact that we envisage this project to have. Of course, probably one of the most challenging dimensions for everyone in this application process is the budget. And Karen, back to you to talk about
So our last top tip is about pay, which is essentially the budget. So Susanna had mentioned this, but what you want to do is balance the expertise with the size of the consortium, because if, like most European calls, the budget is about 3 million euros. If you have 6 partners, you're looking at about €500,000, and there's always a top slice for project coordinators, because obviously they have to hire a project manager to coordinate everything. So you're looking at about just under €500,000. And so the more and more partners you include in the consortium, the smaller and smaller your budget is going to be per partner. So if you can imagine, sort of €500,000 over 3 years it's just over 100,000 per year. So it's not a lot of money when you think 3 million initially. Wow, that's amazing. But when it comes down to it, you have to think the more and more partners you add, the smaller and smaller the budget is going to be per partner. So you have to balance the expertise and think really carefully about the expertise that you want and what institutions you want on board and how many people they are going to include in the consort, in their internal team. Very importantly is to be realistic about the person months. When it comes to work packages and you're thinking through the tasks and the deliverables, it's to match that up on that template that you have to complete for the European Commission in the proposal. And those person months have to be realistic. So if, for example, one partner is going to be doing interviews and you only give them 2 person months to do 50 interviews, that doesn't, even methodologically, that's quite problematic. So you have to be realistic as to what are you going to do in the tasks, what are you going to do in the deliverables, and then factor that all up into realistic person months. And especially if you're going to have innovative toolkits, innovative outputs, as we did, because our whole project was about rewiring institutions and therefore sharing, for example, better practices. And so we are developing toolkits to impact upon companies and organizations. It's different from a normal journal article. So we have to hire professional services to help look at these toolkits. So you have to look at the expertise within your consortium and actually making those person months quite realistic. Also, value for money. So like I said, we offered the European Commission value for money because we were hitting on a number of priority areas, but also in terms of value for money, we were offering not just the usual journal articles, as Panos mentioned, systematic literature reviews. We were actually saying we were going to make a difference with the money that you were giving us, and we could demonstrate that this wasn't going to be a risk because we've already done it before. And I think I'll stop there just to give time for questions because I know we're running out. Sorry.
Thank you. No, don't worry. So thank you both. Some great tips again there, and I'm really glad to see that some of our key points and some of our tips really aligned really well. And I also love the 4 Ps as a way to think about the essential parts of the proposal. So we are only 2 minutes away from the end of the webinar, but Jamie, if you're able to flag a couple of the key questions for us, that would be great.
Yeah, thank you for that. So with a question about sort of the application and the market got in terms of the assessment, are you able to share that with us in terms of there's a question about that? And again, if you were to have done it differently, what was there anything specifically you would have done differently?
We do have the evaluation feedback, but it's a long document. And unfortunately, like Susanna, we didn't summarize it, but we did get a really, really high score, if I remember. Panos was like...
It was 14 out of 15.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. And then the second point then around sort of if there were things I think obviously all the tips you've given were probably things that were hints that you could have either done successes or things that you might do differently. One of them was around work packages though. So I think you outlined how you approach work packages, but was there one in particular that you thought took a lot of time to develop and that needs to be done in a different way, or what? How did you approach those work packages, or could it be done differently?
So with the work package, so we led on the employment and enterprise. There's a work package on media. So the experts in this area worked on these work packages. But the thing was, we didn't want it to be in silos, like that expert deals with that expert. So we came together and shared each other's work packages and work together on the work packages. So, and interestingly enough, because we had a very interdisciplinary team, lots of ideas flowed and there was quite innovative ideas. And, you know, we would go, oh no, we never thought of that. Okay, so we could put that in to our work package. And that's how it all linked up. I don't know, Panos, what we would have done differently? More time?
I think it's a bit difficult to be completely open here when the deadline is looming. But I've already hinted to the fact that it took us a good 8 months to bring the proposal to a stage where we felt it had a good chance of being successful as it was at the end. If I'm being completely frank, the one aspect that I personally underestimated was the amount of time that it takes each consortium partner internally to get through the internal processes, especially with our respective research finance offices. So it was always a bit of a struggle to coordinate the timing there. And it was often the case that at least one consortium partner was lagging behind because of internal barriers that we could not foresee, including mundane issues such as reorganization and so on.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a really important point to end on, to be honest, around so those institutional timelines and the realism and pragmatism around getting the information and knowledge you need to deliver that. So thank you very much both. Kim?
Yes, thank you so much. And thanks for your questions as well. And Karen and Panos for sharing your experiences. That's been so helpful again for prospective applicants, those applying on the 7th of February, and also for those who'll be looking to apply for future calls when they're announced later this year. So with that, we've come to the end of our webinar today. And I just want to say thank you to all for your time and for joining us. A big thank you to our speakers. I really appreciate your time and your willingness to share thoughts, expertise and experiences with us. That's really invaluable. And I hope this has been a helpful session. And if you have any further questions today, you can find my email address on this slide, and please feel free to reach out to me directly. You can also sign up to receive Cluster 2 newsletters, and there's a link on this slide as well. And also through X, or formerly Twitter, if you would like to connect there too, that would be great. And finally, a reminder that I will be sharing these slides, the supplementary documents, including the written Q&A and the webinar recording in the coming days. So thanks again to you all for joining us today, and I hope you will join us again in the future. Bye for now.